Mailbox Dance presents.
First off, I guess, could you describe what queer dance means to you?
Sure. So, queer is now a way people define themselves. Like some people might say, I am queer.
Right.
But they also might use queer as a verb. So, to queer something, which in just sort of a vernacular way we might think of as to make odd or to make it strange. And so, coming out of queer theory and looking at dance, I think about what are ways of looking at dance that might allow us to see differently or see in a non-normative way. So, I don't know. So I grew up in ballet, and probably the thing I did most in the whole world is the Nutcracker.
Mm-hmm.
And like, what would it mean to think about the Nutcracker and pay less attention to like Clara and the Prince and more attention to like what's up with that nephew and Drosselmeyer hanging out and like how that relationship is, one that's not necessarily based in heterosexuality. Maybe they're the same person. Maybe they're having their own homoerotic thing. I mean, I'm just sort of spinning right now, but like as an example of looking at something from a different angle that might help us see other possibilities. Because heteronormativity and gender normativity aren't in us. They're ways of looking. They're ways of thinking. So how do we see differently?
Yeah, so I guess in your experience, how do you think having that kind of perspective, what does that uncover for you?
Well, I mean, as someone who identifies as queer and identifies as a lesbian, like growing up in dance and even studying dance, there are tons of gay and queer and thankfully now trans identified people working in all kinds of dance realms. We didn't like see that on stage a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes it feels like it was a way to find myself and people like me, even in places where people said, oh, there's no like queer possibility in this very classical ballet or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, I mean, I work as a dramaturg too. And so helping people think about different ways of making. I mean, one of the things I say when I teach queer theory to a room full of students who are interested in being dance artists is like, if you're looking at a room of whatever, 4 cis men and 4 cis women, and the only thing you can imagine doing is partnering each man with another woman, like you really lost a bunch of choreographic possibilities, So I mean, maybe I'll tell a story as a way to try to kind of answer it. So great. Queer dance has a website component to it, which is, I believe, 15 films that are either choreographic works that we were able to record and document or interviews I did with artists.
Which I just have to say is super cool because I think it's really helpful to have that visual component.
Yeah.
Just nowadays, especially when we're all on social media and just being able to integrate technology is just like such another way to connect the dots for people.
Yeah, and like I grew up in rural Alabama, and so just having more access to a wider range of performance felt really important. Like
what
12-year-old me would have like had their minds blown by seeing some of that stuff. So I was saying that when I was curating that website, one of the shows we were going to do was a series of queer solos because sort of the queer solo was such a big deal in queer performance and theater. And I thought, we don't really know what a bunch of queer dance solos would be. So I invited several artists to contribute work who I knew often did solo projects. And I asked 5 people to contribute queer solos, and 4 of the 5 wrote back to tell me about the other people who would be in their solos. Which, I was kind of like, wait, but I asked you to do a solo? And like, they were all like, well, I mean, it is really a solo, but like there's some other people in it. And if you watch the works on the website, I think you kind of see what they mean. Like it does sort of spotlight one particular individual, but in relationship to these other figures. So I think there is something about dance and notions of queerness that sort of beg this question of there aren't really solos. Even if one individual is on stage alone, maybe, you know, there's absences and there's ghosts, and then there's also the audience. I don't know. So there's just something like deeply fascinating to me about that. And I write some in the intro kind of trying to theorize what it was about, and also how like queer people are often having to define themselves in relationship to others, either defining themselves, you know, I'm not this sort of straight person that's like all I've ever heard about, or, you know, in some cases people feel like they have to sort of point to their partners in some way to sort of designate their queerness. I don't know. I think there's a relationality, exactly as you say, in the very term, that slides around in all kinds of ways. And if you watch the things on the website, I like that I don't think any of them have a lot of similarity to each other, which was also sort of the curse of the project. I felt like I was going to go crazy, that I was trying to write a book and edit a book called Queer Dance, while also resisting defining the very terms I was using.
I wanted to kind of read an excerpt from your book. Is it okay if I read an excerpt to you?
Sure.
Okay. So you write, it's in the introduction of Dancers as Diplomats. I bring the dancers' voices and experiences to the center of the historical record in an effort to expand a dancer's role beyond that of a muse or mute object, and in fact, to understand dancers as acting as national mouthpieces and politically astute respondents to the nation. And I feel like this excerpt is just so meaningful, because it kind of is addressing, like, we all have these mouthpieces now, and so we're all able to also, like, going back to the curation, curate how we are represented through social media. So I'm wondering, what do you think about how social media is influencing dance?
You're curating how you're seen, and you're also curating what you want to see. I follow different people on different platforms for different reasons. You know, somebody I'm really drawn to on Twitter might not be somebody I'd want to see their Instagram account.
Can you give us a look behind the screen? Who's someone that you follow that you enjoy on Instagram or Twitter?
So I'll be honest, I never ever go on Twitter. It like totally overwhelms me. I have an account that I like go on like once a year or something. I probably go on Instagram more than anything else. I should have prepared better for this. Whose Instagram do I like?
I'm putting you on the spot.
I'm one of many people who like Larry Arrington's feed. I'm doing a lot of taking dance classes on Instagram Live right now, which I never thought I would do, and I kind of resisted at the beginning of the pandemic, but then I needed it. I like Island's website, in part because it's a little cryptic. I like kind of cryptic Instagram things. So I've actually been told when I'm curating shows, I'm not allowed to do my own Instagram anymore because nobody understands it. And a very good friend and artist I admire a lot, Jennifer Harge, always complains that like she knows if I'm running the Explode Instagram feed because I take like fuzzy pictures and then write cryptic captions. And I think they're great, and apparently it's not a good way to get audiences to your show. So that is something I'm curious about with social media. Like, when do we want to be like clear, and when is it about like a weird pop? I have students in a class I teach build Instagram feeds for upcoming shows, and I go back and forth with them a lot about what the priorities are of such things, especially for art.
Thanks for taking your time to tune into Dance Behind the Screen, a bi-monthly interview series where we go behind the screen to question process, product, and social media. Be sure to follow us on social media at KNOW Box Dance. See you next time, and don't forget to say no to the box.